So yes, my name's Sean. I'm look after innovation at the City Council. I was originally an urban planner. I was trained by the Navy and spent 10 years in local government. I can talk for quite some time before I make any sense, so somebody stop me. But I look after the data, basically. So what you're seeing looks a bit like a photograph, but it's not. It's made purely from data. It's entirely computer generated. And this is what we're doing. Everything around you, every interaction, creates a little bit of data. And so what we are is sort of like a nerdy version of plumbers, piping that data in and trying to get some insight out of it. So for example, this is graffiti in Kilburnie. That's 5 years worth of it. These sorts of patterns help us understand what's happening at any given time. And that's what the challenge with COVID has been. A city is an incredibly complicated thing. It's probably the most complicated thing a human creates, or humans create. And those patterns have changed. We're still not sure what those patterns are going to settle on, but understanding things like this can help. I have another one with 10 years worth of vomit data if you ever want to see it. And what's really challenging is this technology is combining with the businesses, the administration of the city, and the lives of our citizens to speed that interaction up. So for example, this is a live picture out of one of the earthquake management systems. So what used to happen is we'd send out our officers, they'd inspect the 1,600 large buildings in the city, return mountains of paper to me, and then I'd spend it sorting it through. Now that same process takes place on cell phones, in the cloud, in these massive models. This kind of stuff matters. Wellington's CBD is the single most productive environment in the entire country. Every day that it is closed, the country loses tens of billions of dollars. Over the last 3 major earthquakes, the Seddon earthquake and the Kaikoura earthquake, what we've done is basically reduce the amount of time it takes to inspect the city, saving the country money, reducing the disruption. And during COVID, we started to utilize some of this technology to far better understand what was happening. So for example, this is the effect of the lockdown. This is made by taking data from Statistics New Zealand, indexing it against the census, and then looking at basically which suburbs are joined to which, how is the pattern changing, where are people spending their time during the day. And this goes back to that point about working from anywhere. Yes, people are staying in their home suburbs, but they're also now going to other suburbs to work. They're going to spend times in cafes and third places. They may not want to work in the office, but they don't necessarily want to be on their own either. And all of this flows up, starts getting turned into boring dashboards, and then we use it to make decisions. So another example is this. This is taking data from all of the street frontages and classifying it into the different industries. And this is where some of that pattern becomes important, because whilst the data tells you what is happening, it doesn't tell you why it's happening, and it doesn't tell you what happens next very often. So what we're looking at are basically dark blue are retail shops, bank branches, institutional uses, pink is the hospitality sector, and we're looking at the vulnerability of different streets. Why are we experiencing disruption, and what are the underlying causes? So for example, bank branches were always going to reduce in number. Technology was doing that. COVID sped that up. That means that the adaptation path for those particular spaces is different to, say, hospitality, where you've got short, sharp disruptions, which are much more amenable to faster responses. And then all of this is flowing up into systems like this. So this is what we call a digital twin. It's that data version of the city. That's me looking for the number 2 bus. So these are linked to all of the buses and the bus stops in the city and tell you where the buses are. We measure the cyclists going down the cycle lanes. We measure pretty much everything you can think of. All of this starts to combine together to provide that understanding of patterns. And that's what becomes really important, because one of the things people love about going to other places is you really notice stuff. And that's because when you're walking around a familiar environment, you're largely functioning from memory. That's why you can pick out when things are different. Understanding these differences and these changes in things like transportation systems, spending, that helps us become more alert to those changes and those opportunities. And that sort of thinking is informing this. Our forthcoming economic well-being strategy, really understanding what does that shift from a COVID world to a carbon zero world look like, and how do the different businesses, the different ways of living, and those different patterns that the city is generating contribute to that. So I'll leave it there, and we'll bring on Martin. He's much more exciting than I am. Thank you.
Right. Okay. All right. I am the economist, so I'm not sure about exciting, but we'll go through it. I haven't got much time. We'll skirt over this. The background, it's nothing new. A vibrant and recovering economy. We've got unemployment on the mend. We've got consenting lifting to historic highs, spread between region and the city almost evenly and quite stable. And we've got our exporters. The prices that they are gaining are lifting again historic highs. Working from home, we've been talking about this for ages. We're sort of a little bit tired of it ourselves. We see this down 15%. These are bus loadings. So we keep a very strong eye on where that's trending. There isn't a trend in there. It's uncertain. It could be going up. It could be staying at 15%. Time will tell. This is an interesting one. We have heard of an exciting vision with plenty of energy from John and Chris. All right? These are the numbers. And they're not quite what we were expecting. So this is week, this is weekend. The magenta is the CBD, the cyan are the suburbs. And of course, post-COVID, we saw this exciting and this vibrant time. We're staying at home, we're visiting our locals. We thought localism has triumphed, and we're going to see that pattern work out. It's not quite how it's happened. We're not sure whether this is a winter event, and come summer, this is going to reassert itself. But the surprising thing from our perspective is we do see this dipping. Okay, this is winter, and data plays funny things at this thing. Okay, over here at the weekend, a slightly different story. The suburban centres more dominant and then falling away. So again, is that a post-COVID thing? Are we going to see it reassert itself again in the future? We will be looking at that very keenly. Airport flight bookings, 90%. There's a little bit of a recovery there. So it is almost back to business as usual for the domestic traveller. So that balance is probably the international traveller. Very quickly, I've got a few wild cards in here. We hope they're going to stimulate a bit of thinking. We've got China and Australia, we've got migration, we've got inflation. In Australia, we see iron ore prices due to demand from China at record historic highs. In the past, when that has happened, Kiwis have gone to satisfy the demand for that trade, to build the infrastructure for the mines. You will have a better handle on it than we do as to what are the children doing. They've been cooped up at home with parents. When the opportunity arises, what will they be doing? Our borders are going to be tight for another how many years? I move on. Migration. Historically, we've seen the largest migration on a per capita basis we've ever seen. This goes back to the 1920s. So it's not forever. But over the last 100 years, it's been at the highest ever. That's been because the mineral sector in Australia was weak and our economy was very strong. So tourism and the agricultural sector. And here's the flow to Australia, just briefly. It just reflects it was high, 20,000 per annum approximately. Come that change in economic conditions, it wound back. Interest rates, we hear a lot about people saying the doomsdayers, inflation's going to obliterate us all, we're going to go back to the 1980s. Yes, it is lifted. Well, these are the interest rates, these are long-term interest rates, but they haven't gone like that. They've kept relatively stable. We're not soothsayers on this. We don't know, but for sure over COVID, we can see the pressures. The building sector is as busy as they have ever been, and prices are rising. Anyone who's trying to work on their house will know that. So there will be a short-term blip. Our best, the best bank's best view is that will come back, because we've got a long-term mismatch of old guys, I say, with money to invest, and not as many young people wanting to borrow that money. Interesting observation in this is by the by. Our interest rates used to be much higher than the US, and this was down to a sort of a risk, what we'd call a country risk premium. They didn't know us, and if they did, they didn't trust us. And look what's happened now. For a little while, we had lower interest rates than the US. Now, if we'd said that 20, 30 years ago, no one would have believed us. So now they know us and they trust our institutions as well as they trust their own. That's a significant change in events. So that's going to make our life looking to the future, I think, a lot more resilient on those financial markets. And that is the basis. We access those international financial markets and they're comfortable with us. We are talking about Australia. We've got a warning out for high inflation, and open borders, they're likely to be good for us. We wait for their visitors to return. Thank you very much.